Hey there, guys. I'm Brianna Hodges.
I'm Lainey Rowell.
And we're going to bring to you kind of a little project that we've been talking about. We're calling it Lemonade Learning. And let's just face it, these days, guys, we've had a lot of lemons handed to us. And as educators and as mamas and just as people, we're really kind of trying to take these lemons and make a lot of lemonade. So we decided that we would just kind of bring our thoughts, our raw emotions and struggles and celebrations to you guys and see how that kind of works. And we like to have lemonade together. So I asked Lainey for her advice about how to be an educator and a mom and deal with all of this. And she was super, super generous to reach back out. So,
are you kidding me? It was like, I can tell you exactly where I was standing in my dining room when I got that message from you. And I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, Bree is perfect. Like, what is she talking about? Asking me how I've got it figured out. And then my second thought was guilt, that I had somehow in my social media online presence conveyed that I have things figured out, that me kind of just like pushing stuff out there was actually a coping mechanism, but that I had actually made it look like I knew what I was doing when it is totally chaos and me trying to figure it out and enjoying the wins when they happen. And there's actually been some really cool wins, but overall it's been chaos. Like, let's be real. It's been total chaos and I'm just trying to figure it out. So when you reached out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then to get to do this where we kind of get to share really raw, like what's happening. I think it's going to be really cool. I hope people want to listen and we want to learn from them and we'll engage with them through social media. I'm super excited.
Without further ado, that's kind of the thing that we're going to do, right? Is just
you nailed it, because we're parents and educators and people are looking to us like we have all the answers. And let's be real, no one has the answers. You and I have a long history with online and blended learning, with educational technology, but this is totally bizarre. This is not online. It's not blended. It's teaching and learning during COVID-19, and we are all figuring it out together. So we want to be really, really, and with that, I wanted to add a quick disclaimer that, obviously, Bree, we're doing this, and this is our moment in time, and who knows what tomorrow is going to look like. So we ask for grace and patience, that if we say something that when you listen to it, it's not exactly what's going on in the world, and we're all kind of on different timelines anyways.
Absolutely. No recipe. We're just winging it. We're going to see how it goes and hopefully learn some things that we might be able to apply in our own situations. So thank you guys for your grace and listening to us kind of give you this backstory. This won't be an every time ordeal, but we wanted to kind of give you a little bit of insight, a behind the scenes, if you will, of where this came from and why we decided to call it this, why we're even trying to do this. We both basically recognized that we're struggling through a lot of these situations and we're looking for some crumbs along the way, right? Of those people who have been there or those people who are trying to go there.
Well, Bree, shall we jump into this? My gardener just arrived, so this seems like perfect timing for us to do a recording, right? This is COVID-19. This is cool.
This is awesome. So one of the first things that we're going to chat about are sours, because that's what you get. You get that punch of sour with lemonade. So I have 2 kids, and I if you've heard me talk about best practices before, this is truly what I believe, which is that my oldest son is very one way, and is super attentive, and whenever I raise my eyebrows at him, he immediately falls in line, right? Like, he doesn't question, he doesn't push back on me. He is like, yes ma'am, yes ma'am, yes ma'am, all of that. My daughter, who is 3 years younger than he is, who I really, really desperately wanted a little girl who looks like me, and guess what? She's that. And she has my sass too. So if I raise my eyebrows and I start to count, she puts her hands on her hips and says 2, 3, 4, right? And so where I'm going with all of this is I have these kids that are so very different. And when I talk about it with best practices, it's because I used the same best practices with my first child that I used with my second child, but yet they don't work the same. The sour that I'm dealing with that has really just got me like totally sideways is my kids are so very different when it comes to their need for attention as far as doing their work, as well as their need for routine. And my son is a go with the flow kind of guy. He totally, like, he can handle spontaneity. He can handle, things kind of coming in and going. My daughter, she loves routines. She wants it to be her routine, though. She has strong opinions about what is acceptable within that routine. And she's been really challenged by the fact that she feels like she has more work than my son does. And so I cannot even talk about the level of meltdowns that we have been having. And as a teacher, Lord, it breaks my heart because I do not feel like I feel really confident in a classroom. I feel really, really confident with the kids that other people have entrusted me with. I suck working with my own kids right now.
I don't think you suck. Let's be clear. I'm going to go on record and say you're amazing, but there's a very different dynamic when it's your own kids. And my sour is similar to yours. I totally agree with everything you said. I have two different kids. I have a 6-year-old boy. I have a 9-year-old girl. One wakes up literally every day at between 6 and 7 and does all of her work. Because that's just who she is. She just loves school. And not to throw my son under the bus, but he's really active, and he is a very typical, like, boy. He wants to be outside and playing. And so sitting down and doing his work is not necessarily his, like, get up and go thing. So it's a struggle. And then I will add to that my sour is I've worked from home for over a decade. It's a challenge under normal circumstances, but right now, when, just like you said, I feel like this child needs this kind of attention and this child needs this kind of attention, and then on top of that, to try and be balancing being the best employee that I can be, best because I'm a consultant helping my clients out. It's challenging. It's really, really challenging. And so I'm trying very hard to deal with the sour is my guilt about it. And that's something I'm super struggling with. And it sounds like you've got some guilt too, even though we're doing our best. We're just trying so hard.
We're doing, and again, to go back to where this all started, like, that's exactly why I reached out to you, was this, as a mom who works from home, typically, who works with my kids every day. When I'm not traveling, I am doing homework, and we're doing, I'm super involved with all of this. And as an educator, I'm very involved in the classroom and looking at it. It's hard for me because I was a secondary teacher. So, the elementary world is a little bit different for me. And, one of the other differences between my kids is that my son is a pretty self-sufficient learner. He, outside of the fact that he is that tween boy, right? So you got to kind of remind him to make sure that he's doing all the things that he's supposed to do. But other than that, he's pretty solid with his stuff. And my daughter, who loves school, absolutely adores it, is a huge people pleaser, also has a touch of the perfectionist in her. Like I said, she's my mini, but she's a struggling reader. And that's really hard for this English major, English teacher of a secondary classroom to wrap my brain around how to really help her, and also help my clients and help my school districts that I'm working with, and not feel like I'm sliding anyone. And it's so hard.
It's really hard. We want to support the teachers that we get to work with. And I think, one thing that, whatever your role in education is, I think one thing that we can all relate to is that we know how to be teachers in the classroom, but to be a teacher to your own kids is a very different thing, because there is just a different dynamic. And so I think we're all, for those of us at least with school age kids at home, we're all struggling. And I am a former elementary teacher. I've taught almost every elementary grade, including all the ones that my kids are in right now. So it's the challenge is real, no doubt about it. Well, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say, I do think, just one last little piece on this is I think that where as that guilt comes in is that don't you feel like you just are having to be on in everything, right? Like, you're having to be on top of your game for for being a mama. You're having to be on top of your game for being a teacher. You're having to be on top of your game for, for your consultancy work, where you are an authority and you are an expert. And this is kind of this is kind of our dream time, minus the deaths and the pandemic situation, right? Like being in this situation where we can talk through what technology can really do to support the needs of our learners is a huge opportunity. And yet we're feeling like we can't be all the things, because nobody can.
And I think there's a real challenge in that I was listening to the Mark Brackett interview on Brene Brown's podcast, and she mentions that when she starts a meeting now, she asks everyone to give 2 words. And she's noticing this real paradox where people are saying like a real positive, but also a real negative. So we're having kind of these 2 like very opposing emotions at the same time. And I think that's where you and I are definitely feeling it, because we have this, our suite, the hope that good will come from this, and that we will get to rethink what teaching and learning looks like so that we can meet the needs of all of our learners. But at the same time, there's so much tragedy and sadness, and it's overwhelming. And so I think you and I both feel like we have to keep it together, because if we can't keep it together, it's all gone. Like it's everyone's falling apart. We're all in the corner in the fetal position, rocking and crying. Like it's bad. Like, so I think this is what we hope happens out of here, is that we can all, kind of come together and share what are some common feelings and some common struggles. And also share some of the things that are kind of wins. And so I think, like, what if we just take like a minute to talk about the wins and the sweetness, like in our lemonade, what's the sugar? So. Right.
What's the sugar? Which I actually love that you just shared that, because that was really truly where my sweet went, like reaching out to you. One of the things that caught my eye really early on, that you shared, was creating this kind of this routine, but not, it wasn't a schedule, right? It was more of like blocks of time that helped almost kind of serve as like time checklists, right? Where it was like, what are the things that we must do? And then are we scheduling time within our day to make sure that it happens, so that we don't wake up, like my kids are, they get their assignments on Friday, and then they're not due until the following Sunday. So, that's different for my kids. Like my kids, my second grader is not accustomed to having, choice, really, truly, to choose when she's going to work through her things. And so I'll be really honest, like our first 2-3 weeks of going through this kind of, whatever it is we're calling it, remote learning, home learning, distance learning, COVID curriculum, kind of whatever this looks like. Yeah. It almost was like vacation time, right? It was like wheels off. We wake up when we want to. We go to bed when we want to. We're eating Rice Krispie treats for breakfast. It was just wheels off. And I felt myself completely shutting down because I was not being productive. I reached out to you, saw the beautiful routines, just because I don't know a better word to use than that you were sharing. You and I talked. I also talked with great friend and mentor, Jessica Cabine, and said, how are you doing this? Like, you guys are freaking amazing. You're doing all these things. And the thing that stuck with me, that everybody kept telling me over and over again, where they were like, pick 3 things that you have to do, right? Like, those 3 things can be super simple. It can be like, shower, brush your teeth, put on deodorant. Like, if you can accomplish that, then you can be okay. And it reminded me to give some parameter to our day, that we needed to do that. So I got to sit down with my kids and have those conversations and remind them that this wasn't we have to get up at 6:53 in the morning, and by 8:27 we will have these things due. Like, that's what that wasn't there, but we wanted to build in the time to make sure that they felt heard and respected, and also had the time for self-care that they both needed. And that really, so that came from chats, and those weren't chats that happened over text messages. Those were video chats that let me connect with other people and see, what they were doing. And so that also spurred into the second part of my suite, which was encouraging my kids to have chats, because they weren't really getting that time with their friends either. They were seeing mom, they were seeing dad, they were seeing some of their teachers, but they weren't getting that one-on-one time. And so we instilled that as well. So checklists and chats became a huge game changer for us.
I agree. And, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was actually, so someone else had posted a schedule with those time blocks, and I saw that and I was like, that's amazing. And then I kind of, we all make our own little adaptations of it. So I took it and I started putting in the stuff that I know from my work as an educator. Like, here's where we could go do something for social emotional learning. And here's a resource for, you can watch Peter Reynolds read a story. And these were all like things that I was like, I just need to, this was like my coping, is I just had to collect it all in one space so that when the wheels go off, I can just like go to something. But I'll be honest, we had spring break last week, and we got out of those routines. I said, I'm going to give them a true spring break. And we're still working this week to get back into those routines. And it's been kind of like on my mind, like, okay, next week, by the way, the gardener's here, if I didn't mention that earlier, this is now the time where we need to get back into those routines. So, and that kind of goes into my suite, which is, my suite is that our routine is a little different in that we're not racing in the morning to get ready to get to school and things like that. So for me, my suite has been that, and I'm sorry to be sappy, but there's morning cuddles and there's morning check-ins, in the hustle and bustle of a normal, like, get ready and go to school. I don't usually get to do a real good emotional check-in. Like, how are you feeling? And what are some things we can do to help you with that? Or even just celebrate if they're feeling good or excited about something. It's normally just, no, we don't have time for that. Like, I'm not gonna ask you how you're feeling. I can't even deal with it if you're not feeling good. I gotta get going. So I think for me, that's been a real sweet, is that I have the opportunity to rethink time and to truly appreciate the time with my kids. And I don't want to lose that when and I do think this will be a gradual return to being physically closer to people. It's not going to happen overnight, but I don't want to lose that when we do get to maybe more regular schedules. So I'm hoping.
I love that. And I would love to also iterate for you that don't think of that as sappy. Like, I think that is so, so, so important, having those emotional opportunities as a mom to sit down. One of the things that I often think about is my morning routine. We live in the country. We have longhorns and Herefords and horses and chickens and and these two little children. And mornings are super hectic for me, right? Because I say this all the time, like, if something doesn't get fed, something dies on my, like, mornings are really, and it's a lot of pressure, right? And so our mornings start really early, and I am not a huge morning person. Like, I'll be the first to admit that. And so I do push the envelope of when I need to wake up. And so what I started to realize was, as I dissected my morning routine, like, when I get super stressed in the morning, what turns around and happens? Like, I start yelling at my kids and they get super stressed because I'm like, hurry, we've got to go. And you've heard me say that my daughter is just like me. When she gets stressed, then she shuts down. And I realized after a few weeks of that I was sending her to school already in this really stressful situation. And so I think for you to pause and have that time to really calibrate that, like, this is more important than having that morning coffee or that this is your commute, right? Like, there's the memes that are going around about working from home, right? And it's like, do I sleep on my couch to cut back on my morning routine or my morning commute? I think this is the replacement for checking your email at 7:45 in the morning. Now you're checking your kids' emotional, litmus and see where they're feeling. So don't ever feel sappy about that. Like, you're teaching them the good stuff right there.
Well, I think you're right. We have a great opportunity to reprioritize. And so thinking about, like, what is actually the essential part of your morning routine, seems like a really good takeaway from all of this. So,
and, I mean, who am I to say this? You're definitely the elementary expert on this, but I mean, isn't that like the morning meeting, right? Like that's what our teachers do. They have the morning meeting. What are you celebrating today? All that. Like that's what you're doing. You're doing it from the
this is something elementary teachers we get to do. We get to start off the day by like setting the tone and focusing on building community and like the welcome. And that's really hard to do in a secondary environment, but that is something that we have the luxury of doing in elementary. So, but it's funny that even though I'm
model teacher, you can't take you out of the classroom. Like you weren't even thinking about it.
But how many times have I rushed my kids to school without thinking about it, even though that is my mode when I'm in the classroom, and I still get to go in the classroom, which is such a treat. And I go right back to that. Yet when I'm at home with my kids rushing off to school in the normal, in our old normal, I would forget it. It did not translate. So I could be really good at something in the classroom and totally fail at it at home. So.
Absolutely. I think that is very true. Oh, look.
We have a visitor. Oh my gosh. It's Mini-Me.
Hello. Very good. Very good. Wow. How funny. We were just talking about you. Yeah.
Okay, Bree, I know we're going to try and share some tips and as we go through all this. And I came across one on Twitter that totally made me think of you because I know you love a good sports metaphor. So I'm going to read it. Basically, just the context. Someone on Twitter said, hey, we need like a playbook for how to do COVID-19 as teachers. And I thought that was hilarious. And then someone responded, and I loved this person's response. And it was, ensure kids are fed, make every effort to connect with them, to share your love and talk them through this. And then try your best play from third and long. Realize long-term change and impact is the goal, and punting is okay sometimes. And I love that, the punting, and this is like a total struggle that I have been dealing with is like trying to keep that long view, but that, I don't know, for me, that punting okay is sometimes, that was kind of a release, like, okay, it's okay. What do you think?
I love that. I mean, you do, I the coach in me, the athletic coach in me, I can't resist a good sports analogy. And so I am right there. Like one of the things that I do, I believe in plays. I believe in playbooks. Here's the thing that comes with that. The caveat that comes with that from a sports standpoint is what works in a play. Play is your ideal, perfect situation. It's like your ideal classroom, right? And then you come in there and something's gonna not work, right? Like all of a sudden you go in, you have scouted this team, you know inside and out what's gonna come into it. You've got the best defense planned. You come in there, you call the play, and suddenly there's a timeout and they've had like this 6'5" move in from, the district across the street that you had no idea was even on their team, and it blows your ideas completely out of the water. And so, I guess what this really reminds me of is that the best laid plans, right? Like you can have one, it's not always going to work. And you have to go on your situation and you have to go off of your team and as well as the team that you're playing against, right? And so I think it's really important to keep those things in mind. And I love that. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about with our checklist, right? Like keep it simple. When you're the rules of any sports game, when you really boil them down, are pretty minimal, right? And we complicate it because we try to figure it out, and we try to add in all of these extras and these tips and tricks and trick plays and all these different things. But we really just need to get in there and play ball.
I agree. And by the way, I want to make sure and give credit. That was Mark Estrada Jr. on Twitter who did that. I thought that was just it was such a nice release. I use the phrase grace and patience all the time lately. And I have to remember to give myself grace and patience. So I think that was what was part of that resonating with me. It was like, sometimes you're going to punt. And I see this in my projects all the time too. I'm like having this really grandiose ideal of what I want this project to turn into for these educators and for their students. And sometimes we don't have enough to do that. We just don't. This is a crisis, and we're trying to work through it. So we're gonna punt on this one, and it's gonna be okay.
You have told me this so many times, and I think it's worth the reminder, right? Like, these are not ideal times. It takes a lot of forethought, a lot of professional learning, a lot of practice, right? You don't go in to the national championships having never practiced before, like all of a sudden just immediately picking up a ball for the first time, right? You have done run-throughs and scrimmages and all kinds of stuff leading up to that, and we didn't really have that. Even our most technologically savvy districts were not really prepared for the crisis that this really is. This is a traumatic crisis. We have kids that are continually evolving in their needs because they've got illnesses that are being struck, or they have parents that are in those essential worker roles, and they're on their own trying to navigate these situations, all these different pieces that are coming through. And this is not the perfect world. So we've got to give ourselves some time to think through that.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen, at least with this podcast. And if you were to ask me, I would say, I don't quite know yet. I think this is a work in progress, and I am just so excited to be able to learn from you and with you. And then also, we want to try and engage people on social media so we can amplify the voices of all the amazing educators out there who are killing it working through this very difficult situation. We want to really amplify their voices, share their tips, like we did Mark's advice. And so, I don't know, what do you think? What should we tell people is next to come?
I think absolutely. We know that we're better together, right? Like, we keep hearing that everywhere. We've heard it before in education, but especially now, we know that we've got to have we've got to have the room around us and really kind of build from it. As you alluded to earlier, we're all at different times and places in this journey, and let's learn from each other. So that said, I think one of the things that I'm most hopeful for is that we're going to get some engagement off of this, and people are going to share their favorite tips and tricks or what's working for them. With that, we're hoping you're going to share your sweets. We're also hoping you're going to share your sours so that we can learn from each other. Needed you to help us get to where we were with checklists and chats, and I would not have gotten there if I hadn't shared my sour in order to get that sweet. So we've put together some graphics that we're going to share out through social media. They're really meant just to be kind of like placeholder templates, and for people to add to those and share their thoughts, right? So share those tips and tricks, and use the hashtag Lemonade Learning, and let's kind of build this plane while we're flying it. I think that was, when you and I first chatted, we didn't know where this was going. We were just doing mom to mom.
We still
right?
Yeah.
And then we were like, then you mentioned like, well, what could we do? And you threw out a podcast, and I was like, I've never done one. Okay, let's try it. And if there's one of the sweets that I definitely think comes from this time, it's try it, right? Like, we have the time. You talked about, we've got the time now. Try it and see, and also remember to be graceful. Having grace and sharing grace is what makes us humane. And I think that is so important. We kind of titled this episode Messes, Moms, and Mantras. And I think that, that with the subtitle of Grace and Flexibility. And that's exactly what this is flexible grace, I guess.
Yeah. So I think we're kind of advocating for you to give yourself permission to fail forward, and we're doing that right now in front of you. So we're very excited about this. We're going to share stuff that we learned from people, some things that we figure out along the way, and we want to share your successes. So reach out to us on social media. We're going to try and keep it brief and helpful, and we're super excited to start this journey with you. Thanks, friends.
Thanks so much.